So, Matt, why don't you take the lead here with Dr. Terry and some of the just general updates, since we only have 15 minutes with both of you, and maybe give us some general since we're all adjusting to the last minute changes in the state and local governments. We figured we'd jump on a call, and we also have Keith Scully that's going to join us to chat a little bit about strategic planning around how we're all, navigating this return to play and from an organizational structure. And then we have Chris McClellan from Roanoke Star, who's already had a few weeks of experience back on the field. It looks like he's headed to the field now as well. So yeah, Matt, why don't you take the lead here in the first 15, and then I'll jump back in when you guys sign off.
Sure. So I met Terry through the task force with the state on return to play protocols, and we thought we had a pretty good plan together, submitted to the governor, and then yesterday that all went to hell. Terry is a doctor with Towson Orthopedics, and I invited her on to kind of talk through what the medical profession is talking about from a return to play standpoint. And I know, Terry, you have a short time frame, so I'll just let you go.
Okay. So thanks for, and I really don't have anything super planned, so I'm interested in questions you might have. But I guess the take that I would say on this, especially as I think the governors are kind of allowing or saying kind of go back, the cautions I would have, the things I would want like youth programs to have kind of set up is, I think it's important that one thing we talked a lot about, and we had infectious disease specialists on our calls, temperature screening, make parents feel more comfortable, but in terms of actually doing it, probably questionnaires are more important. And those questions are, in the last 24 hours, have you had a fever? Have you had any contact in the last 14 days with someone that has COVID? And then documenting who's at your field, just so that if someone does come down with COVID, and have to trace who they were in contact with, you at least have like an answer of who they have been with. So I think questionnaires, I think I've seen some of your like return to play policies. I saw Alexandria's. I think the big things are, making sure you're doing social distancing when possible. I think having coaches, especially if they're talking to the group and trying to keep kids spaced out when you're talking to them, and wearing a mask on the sideline is a good idea. I don't think the kids should be wearing masks, and I think pretty much everyone agrees with that. I think the other thing, as an organization, I would put out a notice that these are high-risk individuals. And if, there's a pretty good list from the CDC. If you look at our plan for Maryland, we have the list of people that should be careful. And I think these individuals, you should really make them aware that they probably should not be coming out and participating right now, or their parents should not be on the sidelines. I think that you need to have waivers that people are signing, just like, we use waivers for, using your facilities and things like that. I think you need to add a COVID waiver that they sign, that they understand there is risks involved, just like there's risk of injury, there's risk of getting COVID if you're participating. Just again, to kind of provide you guys with some coverage. And then I think availability and accessibility, or making the kids each bring their own bottle of hand sanitizer, is a really good idea. And if you're seeing kids that are touching their face, wiping their face, maybe having someone coach, educating your coaches, hey, tell them to put hand sanitizer. Like, again, not your complete role, but, we all know those kids that are always doing that to their face and making sure before they touch. And I know I saw, again, you're lucky you're soccer, they're not touching the ball, hopefully, so you're not doing throw-ins, things like that, until we get to a little bit different phase. But I think those are kind of some of the big things. I think the other thing is, I know the new restrictions from Maryland don't really come out and specifically say now, okay, there can only be 10 people in a certain group. And so that seems to be one of the things that's gone away. But I think you might still want to think about, as you're organizing your groups, keeping certain groups of kids together, because what happens if one kid gets COVID? Do you want your whole team not to be able to play anymore? And so again, one of the reasons to have them practice in cohorts of 10, or however many you deem, is those are the kids that are staying together. So if a kid there gets it, you only are losing those 10 kids, not all 50 kids. And again, so those are things that I would kind of think about: screening, high-risk populations, having them not come, lots of hand sanitizer, and cohorting kids and separating them so you don't lose whole groups. And I'm open to, I can tell you a lot more if you want more, but I'm willing to answer questions that just might come up, because I think that might be more beneficial, because you guys are in all different geographic areas as well.
Yeah, we have a little smaller group today, so if people have specific questions they want to just pop in and ask. The one thing that just came up for me, if a kid does test positive, or an adult right now, from the medical standpoint, how are you tracing, and do you essentially then put on like a mandatory quarantine for anybody that they've potentially come in contact with in what time period?
And it's, I mean, so it's, and again, this is where it becomes tricky, because it's prolonged, sustained contact. So what is that? Is that an hour soccer practice? But I would say, like if you've been around that kid several days, and it's usually 14 days. If the kid themselves, so like, let's say you actually get COVID, you're COVID positive, you basically are out 10 days from symptom onset and 72 hours without fever, without medicine. So if you are the person that gets COVID,
No answer. I'm gonna text them right now.
You would be out for at least 10 days.
I just got a question on the chat. If you're running a camp, should you screen at the beginning of every day or the beginning of every week?
Every day.
Okay. Is there?
And there are some, I've heard I haven't seen them yet. I know there are some apps that have been developed that you can screen them, and they come in with a green light or something, and so you might want to look to see if you can find something like that. You could also have them like set up like, survey monkeys or whatever, so that they answer before they get there, that might be helpful. And then maybe they just turn in their sheet so that you have who was there that day and that they answered the question, so that you have it documented.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. So that they could potentially get an auto pre-screen before they come, like like an email or and fill that out. That's a really good idea.
And the other thing to definitely do is, obviously tell all your families, if your child has a fever or anyone in their family has a fever, and are being evaluated for COVID, they should not come,
Yeah. So do you foresee once there's team competition, if there's a positive test, that becoming an issue with opposition, or is it too kind of early? That was one of the questions here.
Meaning if someone on the other team came back positive, would it affect you?
That and to the screening question too, or is this going to be something we need to potentially plan for in the next few weeks as we go into the next phase, pre-screening both teams?
I would say yes. I would suggest that.
Okay. And
then I think if I would say if you're playing in a game and someone on the other team is positive, I don't know that would give me a positive that, because again, you probably are, like, again, in practice, you probably interact with the 10 people you're with more than the person you're running by in the field. Now, again, you're one-on-one with one kid. There might be one kid that is, more exposed to one other kid, but I would say in an outdoor facility, now if we're talking indoor, it might be a little different, but outdoor, which is I think what most of us are doing right now.
Yeah.
I think you're probably okay. But I would if they, and again, because a lot of times what happens is they would have screened, so they shouldn't have a fever while they're there. And so 3 days later, they get COVID. I think there's question of whether or not it's really more when you're that the fever that you have more transmission rates.
Okay. So another question here, there's been some talk about now that testing is more readily available. Is that something that we should, I don't know if require or highly recommend, or with our coaches, is that something that people are starting to do with their coaching staffs to recommend that they get testing ahead of,
I don't think that that's currently a recommendation. And one of the problems is even amongst infectious disease, we're not sure what a positive antibody test means. Like, does that mean you can't get it again? Does that mean you're protected? There's still a little bit of a question of that. So if people want to get it on their own and get it tested, that's one thing, but I think to require it or to think that if they're positive, they have no chance of getting it is probably not recommended at this point.
Okay. Does anybody else want to chime in? I've got a couple people sending questions here on the chat. Other than that, I mean, the apps that I think the app that you mentioned would be really. Do you think having, like, what other measures based on kind of what you saw on how you know, because people are just kind of 2 days and they're like, we got to go, right?
Right.
Is there anything you would caution right now? And I'm actually, Chris, if you want to chime in here soon. Chris's club has already been transitioning back in, so maybe if Chris, if you could piggyback on any of that with some of the doctor's recommendations and things you've been seeing, you know, to kind of transition from that as well.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Tommy?
Yeah. Perfect.
Okay. One of the things that the doctor said I really liked and that we're trying to implement is that you know, if you or a family member are sick, and I think that's a lot of people, we're just leaving it as the kid being sick, but it's if you or your family member. And one of the things we've tried to improve the most out of all of this is just transparent communication between family members and club representatives. So a quick example was we had a kid who came to training on Saturday. Well, on Sunday, she hung out with her grandfather who came down with a fever and possible COVID. So he went and got tested Monday. Well, the mother said, we're going to keep her out of training all week and wait until there's a positive or a negative result on her grandfather. Well, it came back negative. And so that girl ended up missing one training as a precaution. You know, one of the things that I think is most important is just that people are readily available to give you the information that is necessary. The other thing I would say is the temperature checks. It's not as easy as people would say. So what we've gone away, we haven't gone from on-site temperature checks, but we've requested that if anybody has a temperature that is, you know, and parents typically have a good feel on this, over 99, just stay home. Like we don't need you to come out and possibly share it. And the way we've gone about doing it is through our RSVP. Every player has to RSVP for every training that they're going to participate in. And when they do that, they have to acknowledge their standards, our standards and our expectations, which is basically a waiver every time they sign up, saying that they know they could come in contact with it, or they shouldn't be participating if they have it.
Doctor, does that sound in terms of calibrate from your
good.
front? Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to make sure I said too, I didn't say it was, you know, and I know you guys are all involved in this, but just remembering these kids, you've got a huge variability on what kids have been doing at home. I mean, some of the kids, unless they're playing sports or playing video games, and some kids are outside playing in the yard, so you've got a wide variability on conditioning. If you haven't looked at, the NSCA has a great recommendation on conditioning and returning to like slowly building kids up over weeks. I'd recommend you look at that and just remember not every kid's gonna come. So maybe doing a little bit of conditioning testing so you know where the kids are on your team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think, so Chris and Doctor, I know it's 15, so I want to be sensitive if you have to take off. Is this a good time to transition off for you?
If you have any more questions, I can stay for a minute. I just have to be at something by 4, and I didn't want to miss it.
Okay, cool. So, Chris, can you expand a little bit? I do have, and maybe, Doctor, I'm going to screen share our return to play draft that we've got going at Alexandria. But Chris, can you explain a little bit more about all of the different guidelines for like, you know, for coaches, for parents, for players, in terms of how you've actually safely returned and equipment, you know, all the different variables that are in play?
So this is a tricky one because when you read, so just using VYSA as an example of who is setting guidelines that we are specifically following, right? VYSA mostly follows U.S. Soccer or USYS, and they're in line with those, but we are following VYSA's, and VYSA gives you if you read their list, it gives you must do's and things you should consider. So those are two different categories, and we try to do our best to adhere to all of those if possible. So what it looks like for a coach on a given day, all coaches are required to wear a face mask. No coach is required to set up their own grid. That's done by a staff member. And it's done before everybody shows up. So, when I have a 9 o'clock session, I'm usually out there by 7:30 setting up all the fields so that when every person comes there, the cones and flags are already in place. Other things that all coaches get a hand sanitizer bottle because I liked what the doctor was saying that every kid should have it. But let's be realistic. My refugee player who's coming from a house that he might have not seen his parents for the last 24 hours. I need to make sure he has hand sanitizer. And so what we've prescribed to our coaches is that pre-training, all kids get hand sanitizers. Middle of training, if they need it. So if you see a kid who's rubbing their face or who has had their hands on a soccer ball or, just done something out of the ordinary, they should get it in the middle. And then post-training, all kids would get hand sanitizer. We felt like if you did a hand washing station, you would have then paper towels that could be contaminated. We didn't want to do a centralized hand sanitizer because we felt like if everybody's using the same nozzle, it would possibly become contaminated. So we went with individual bottles, and basically we were able to go out and find a company, and I can put you guys in contact with them. But they gave us these like 4-ounce bottles, and we bought something like 50 of them, and then we bought a refill bottle so that we will refill them as a staff and keep them populated for the coaches. They turn them in after every one, and being the lucky guy that I am, I get to wipe them all down. So, but that's how we're doing it as far as that. Players are to remain in their car until it's their time for their session. If the field is clear, we allow the players to come on. All players are assigned a field or a quadrant on a field, and that is given to them the day prior before they arrive. So every kid shows up saying, I am on field 5, quadrant C. And we gave them a field map. We've walked them through it. They know who their specific coach is for that day. And when they come, they're told to go directly to their quadrant. And part of our standards and expectations is that they're not to go to any other grids, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're in field 5, quadrant C, when you walk from your car, you walk directly there. And when you're done with training, you walk directly back. Mm-hmm. During the session, if your ball goes into another grid, the coaches will communicate, and we'll make sure that ball gets back so that you're not going into other grids. That's one of the things I think the doctor made the best point in a lot of the things she said today was putting the kids in specific groups so that they do not, socialize or possibly get other kids sick beyond the 7, 8, 9 players they're with. So our groups when we first started 2 weeks ago were 7 to 8 players, and now that we're in phase 2, we can go up anywhere 10 to 12 players in a quadrant, staying under 50, mm-hmm. if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So the third part was the parents. The parents are to remain either in their cars or in their parking lot. Around our fence or around our fields is a fence, and we were told we told parents to please stay outside the fence And to be honest, we haven't had an issue with any of those three layers, players, parents, coaches, and it seemed to be somewhat of a healthy environment still.
That's awesome. So what are you guys doing about equipment? Like, balls, pennies, cones, is that all just only handled by that specific coach, or what are you doing for all the goals, all the different like layers of equipment?
Yeah. So the only thing we are providing as a staff are either cones or poles type of, anything that might be laid down to kind of show the exercise. We are not using pennies. We're not in we don't feel that pennies are needed until we get actually into phase 3, where contact might be able to happen. So every exercise we're doing, there is some competition in it, but it's focused around more about technical development. We might do a possession exercise, but it is clear who the two people are in the middle, and that's a very well coned out area that the players have to remain in. If they don't remain in it, and they keep breaking rules and we have to keep reminding them, if they're not holding our expectations, then in that waiver that they signed, it clearly says we can ask them not to come back until we move to a new phase if they're not going to adhere to what we're doing. And we make sure everybody knows that that's the case. What was the other part? All kids bring their own ball and their own water.
Okay. So
can I make 2 suggestions based on what he said too? The bottled water, they should have their name on it, because we all know that there's many that look the same and they'll drink out of the same. I see your picture here. Like, the person that's cleaning all the balls and all the hand sanitizer should really put gloves on their hands so they don't get contaminated if any of them are contaminated. And then the only other thing I didn't see on here is, and I don't know how much soccer players do this, but like chewing gum, spitting, sunflower seeds, all of that should not be allowed. I mean, most fields don't allow it anyway, but it might be just something to remind the kids or have it on this list that they can't spit, because a lot of kids do that.
yeah, that's all really helpful. Chris, anything else just that you could think of from an operational standpoint, planning, in terms of coach management? Did you have to do a specific training for them? Are you giving them all the specific activities? We largely administrators on this call, so no need to dive too deep into the activity part of it, but just thinking of terms of the operational and training aspect that you had to do to get everybody ready to follow all these different variables.
Yeah. So, one of the first things we did, we had 2. So we've been having Zoom meetings all during the COVID. Our coaching staff has been on Zoom meetings pretty much once a week. Not mandatory, but it is highly suggested. But then we ended up having 2 mandatory Zoom meetings just to really go through the standards. And one of the things that I did, and I really found helpful, is that we read through the standards together as a coaching staff, and I asked the coaching staff, what else would you like it to say? What else do you feel could be added to it or manipulated so that you feel comfortable with that standard or expectation written for these parents to read? Because a lot of these coaches, a lot of them have fears about their own liability. And so I wanted them to have a voice. And I think that's very important to give them. Another thing I would say with the administrative part of it, coaching is not mandatory right now. It is who's available and who has the willingness to do it. We've got one coach who is an essential worker, and he felt like, Chris, I should just not be there. There's another guy whose wife is a nurse. Hey, complete respect for your personal standings or your personal beliefs or whatever your desire is. So we are not forcing coaches to come in. Same with kids. We are going to respect your stance on this. And when you're ready, we're ready to have you back. Another logistical thing about the fields I just was thinking of, every sideline and every quadrant has we actually did 9 feet apart of dashes for kids to place their bags and water bottles. And when they arrive, they go to their dashes, and that's where the coaches do their hand sanitizer. And it's strange how the kids actually wait for the coaches to tell them to go out. They're very the kids know that there's something going on that's not normal. So building in them to respect the process has been one thing we've felt has been strong.
That's awesome, man. That's all really good stuff. I think Matt, are you available just to kind of and Chris, that's huge stuff, man. If you can hang on, great. If you got to go, you're getting ready for the field, so I really appreciate it.
No, I'm staying on the whole time. Yeah, I'm not here.
All right.
So if you give it a few minutes, it will turn into
sorry, I'm listening to 2 calls at one time. What do you want me to go over?
No, I just, from a facility standpoint and you having such a large staff as well, Chris mentioned some of the sensitivities to staff management right now in terms of not mandating, because I think one of the challenges here is we can welcome people back, but if staff aren't comfortable, I know you've been looking at a lot of the legal stuff too. What do you advise there to everybody from the legal standpoint and just staff management as a whole right now?
Yeah, I mean, the legal standpoint gets a little tricky. It's one, and again, I'm not an attorney, so I don't want to give legal advice here, but my personal advice to you is be flexible with people. There's going to be people that are scared on your staff that don't want to come back, people that are at risk. We did it at the Soccerplex where we're manning the facility with one person a day, but we did not make that mandatory for everybody. So it was a volunteer basis of who wanted to do that and who did not. Be compassionate with people and understand that people are in different places with this, or may have had different experiences, that they may have a family member that have been sick, or they're a nurse or a doctor or a frontline worker somewhere. So you just need to be understanding with people and work with them as best you can. As this moves further along, and we'll see how opening up affects us, whether it's a spike in cases or if we continue to see downward trends, and then modify accordingly from there. From a legal standpoint, if someone has to either quarantine or care for someone that is infected, they are legally protected under the CARES Act. So definitely pay attention to that side. It gets a little tricky if they say they don't feel safe coming back to work, because then you have OSHA standards that you have to meet. So that's one that you definitely need to talk to your counsel about if you run into those issues where someone refuses to come back to work, if you are providing safe environment or you believe it's a safe environment. But again, that's something you should talk with your legal counsel about.
Awesome. So if anybody else has any questions from a return to play and just any variables that you're coming up. Chris, did you have everybody sign the waiver that BYSA sent out?
So we actually created our new one. I don't know if you remember seeing the one from Brian. They gave a lot of verbiage as far as waivers were concerned. We actually just put that into our standards and our expectations acknowledgement. And so it kind of all went together as one waiver acknowledgement. Again, they have to do that. They have to acknowledge it every time they RSVP for a session. So, if a kid wants to come to a Wednesday session, they have to be RSVP'd by a Tuesday at 5 p.m. and acknowledge that expectation and waiver online. Everything's done online through our Demisphere program.
Awesome. Cool. So I'm going to bring in our other resource here, Keith Scully. I know he's got to run here too, because he's balancing teaching Georgetown classes and running his own business. So Keith, I know you have to run here in a minute, but any advice, guidance that you have just listening to the call and guiding us forward would be awesome.
Yeah, I had a chance. Matt sent me a couple of the documents which were very well written on getting back to play. One big recommendation I'd make for all of you has to do with the amount of information that's being dispersed out there. It's just overwhelming. And on top of that, it's changing at a moment's notice. So it's really dissipating the information in a little bit simpler for everybody to stay on board with. My recommendation is that you set it up in one of your breakdowns that you have particular stakeholders. So it's really coming through based on a phase basis by stakeholder. Go ahead and identify what's applicable to them. So the stakeholders being your players or your spectators or your staff. But I would also add into it a simple guidelines for parents, because probably the most nervous people with the youth athletes going back are the parents. So with all the changes going through, communicating more simply to them is probably a good idea. Lastly, I'll make the recommendation, Matt and I talked about this, it's really visual communication on the fields themselves. The changes that keep going through and the amount of, I'll just say, brain space people have on remembering what's supposed to be happening, it's not going to translate. So posting what's happening is really becoming mandatory. With talking with other event people that are trying to go ahead and get themselves back on the field too. So those are just a couple of quick recommendations I have based on what you're working on. Matt and I be in contact as well. If you have anything that you need to catch up with me on how to do the communication directly, I can help you on that too.
Keith, can you just give us a little bit more of an intro here? I know we kind of jumped around. So just to give people a little bit better idea of how you've been helping people, and it sounds like Matt's been getting the most help here.
Well, my background is that I worked for Nike for 9 years, and I'm still a consultant for Nike. And I work with a couple of small divisions for them. I work with them on NCAA, and I work with U.S. Olympics. I also work on a global basis with New Balance on programs with them, everything from strategic planning on, just strategic planning. Lastly, I work with the USTA currently, with the US Open, and they're phasing to go ahead and get their $1 billion, 500,000 people event up and running, where they have some challenges. And as you probably see, it's changing every day with them too. So I have a little input I can give you on some of my experiences with that.
That's awesome. Thank you, Keith, for offering to be a resource for everybody here, and for jumping on. I think the communication stuff is a huge challenge because, to your point, there's just so much, right? There's so many different variables in play right now. Chris, did you guys put signage on the field to Keith's point?
We have kept field close signs up everywhere. To be honest, we didn't put signage. I actually think that's a brilliant idea. I was just writing it down as you said it. So
it's not my idea.
It's whether it's yours or not, it's worth taking. So
I'll make a quick recommendation though, and it's not a byline, but BSN Sports has done an incredible job of setting up the planning to go along with the signage necessary for the events. So you may want to see what they have online and see how they might be able to help you. And I gotta roll. Matt, we'll catch up.
Thank you, Keith.
Thanks everybody. Good luck.
Yeah.
I would, Tommy, I would say to Keith's point, what we did was we did a layered approach to our return. So we emailed everybody 1 week out saying, hey, next week is the plan for our return, start on Saturday. These will be some expectations you can plan to see. You will get your rosters on this day. You will get your ability to RSVP that link the next day, so on and so forth. So we were kind of easing them in. One of the things I would say, this is not a great time to just drop bombs on them. People are kind of on edge. So if you just throw out all the information at one time, majority of the people are going to miss some of that important information. So I would say layer it and make the information accessible. We put ours. I put one of our pieces of communication in our updates on our website, so everybody can resource it there. But like we just wanted to make sure that these people knew that we're amateurs at this as well, right? We've never come back from a pandemic into the soccer world. And the other thing I would say is we requested from parents to not complain. I saw this on a board at a restaurant. It said, if you have a complaint, please call us and get in touch with our manager, but please don't do it in public as it raises the concern of other people who are out there. And some of them have taken a big step to be out there. And so we ask parents, if you have an issue, do not come on the field. First off, you're breaking a rule. We have to tell your kid not to come back. But then second off, just email us or call us the next day, and we will make ourselves available for you in that concern you might have. But that is a huge thing. I know I have one family in particular in our club who the mom is a stressed out mess every time she brings her stressed out kid to the training, and all the other kids joking about it make it that much harder on them. So our coaches are trained to alleviate that situation by moving them on to a new topic or whatever that might be.
How have you
John,
seen?
I'll add a couple things here too. Simplify your messaging, especially with signage. Use pictures as much as possible. We know kids definitely have short attention spans, so something quick that they can look at and grasp the idea is all you need. You see these signs that have like 400 lines on it. No one's reading that. And this is a big one, this day and age. Make sure your stuff's in Spanish. I think we all struggle sometimes with the Latino community of getting our messaging out there. And while the players on your team may understand English perfectly fine, their parents don't always do. So if they don't know the rules and they walk on your field because the messaging's not in Spanish to them, then you're going to have to deal with that. And do you punish that kid because the parent just doesn't understand? So make sure you are communicating to everybody effectively based on how your organization is set up and who your membership is.
Yeah, that's awesome. Chris, have you guys gotten feedback? Like, I'm just think like going through the parent observations of your sessions and all the different operations. Have you gotten any concerned parents giving you feedback on anything yet, or?
We have not gotten one negative comment. We have had one parent who, or a couple parents who have just shown concern, and they felt that maybe there were too many kids on the field at one time, and that was back when we were in phase one. Now we're in phase two. It's a little bit different, and that she actually feels different about it now. But we did. So, like I said, VYSA is very vague in their phase one return. It says no more than 10 people on one field. Well, is that a 7v7 or is that a 9v9? Is it a 11v11 field? They're not very specific. We took it as 7v7 because we could feel our fields are very big, and we tried to make it feel as safe as possible. And now you can have up to 50 people on one field. So it's a little bit different. So we're actually using that as the 11v11 field, that number. But most everybody is positive. Most of them are just happy to be out. So if you're showing to them that you're putting in the effort to make this a safe environment, we've had support by everybody. And actually, to be honest, I've had more communication with 70% of our club than I've had in a long time. Not because I don't communicate with a lot of people, but because they've all had to reach out to me. And if they've had a question, they have to email me. If they forgot to RSVP their kid, they email me, and we have quick conversation back. That was another rule I forgot to put out there. Kids who were not on the RSVP list and they showed up, we've sent them home. And one of the reasons why is we felt like, man, you guys you skipped the most important part, helping us plan for a safe environment. And so we said, come back when you've RSVP'd. We've had to turn away 2 kids. It was on the very first day. And the reason we did that was we were just trying to set a standard that we were going to stay with the whole time and be kind of strict. It's not like we're trying to be jerks, but we're trying to be mindful that this is a new day and age, and we have to tackle these situations differently than we normally would. Because normally we would welcome any and every kid in. Now we're welcoming any and every kid that RSVP that they're going to be there. And I've noticed too, I put out my rosters, and some families will write back, hey, I RSVP'd no on this day, just making sure that you understood that we weren't going to be there if that affects your numbers. So that's been a good thing. There was another logistical thing I was just reading in my notes. I put out a table on our standards that says basically 1 to 9 players, we would have a minimum of 1 group, and I lit through and I did 10 to 18 players, minimum of 2 groups, and I went through 9 to 27, 28 to 36, and I just went down so that everybody knows however many kids are out there, that's how many groups we're going to have a minimum of. So we weren't overcrowding our groups or our numbers, and because everybody in our system could see how many kids were registered on a specific night. So they knew that there would be that many groups out there. And it also allowed me to plan for our coaches each day. So if I need 6 coaches, I know if there's going to be something like 50 kids out there, I know I need 6 coaches to manage that. And typically I kept myself as the director out of the groups unless I needed myself to be in there. And I tried my best to help the parents understand where they could be. I tried to, I had one coach who sat in the parking lot the whole time and talked to parents about what they could or couldn't do. I thought that was probably one of my best things I did on day one, was myself and another guy being available the entire day to answer questions, help kids go where they are, where they're supposed to be. Every coach had a roster for every field too. That was one thing. Every coach on a day when they showed up, they got a roster and they got the session plan that they had already been emailed anyways, and they knew. But they all went by the same session plan and they went by the same rosters, and nothing changed from when I sent it out. So I have to be very good in my administrative role. So I'm sending out this paperwork. That's what we're going by. I can't change, because if I change, it can throw things off, and people don't want that instability when it comes to if they're unsure about something or not.
No, that's all really good. What percentage of the participant have you seen come out?
Yeah, this is a good question. So right now our participation on a given night is about 70%. And it's about 10% of people who either are not coming out because of they're afraid, or they've got somebody who's in their household or whatever. And the other part is, like, the other 20% is a lot of people are traveling right now because they've been cooped up. So there's in our club, a ton of people are traveling right now. But like most days on a given field, we're training anywhere from 30 to 40 kids, and we'll have 3 fields running at one time.
So you are not necessarily isolating people. It could be a different group of 9 each time, basically.
It is every time. And I made sure they knew that. I made sure our parents know the groups will and can change. And you're divided up by age and skill. It's like it's a recipe of both of those. Like, you're not just on your team. And I made sure everybody knows that this is not an environment for competition. This is an environment for individual development. And when I started setting out my communication early on that, I was consistently putting that back in there. I want kids to get back out in a structured environment. I want kids to come in and work on their personal development and do it in a group environment to show everybody what they have been working on at home. Somebody just put, I'm from VBR Star. It's in Roanoke, Virginia.
Yeah.
So I really believe that the more you give the families, the better they are as far as how comfortable they are, but the better they are at understanding what you're trying to achieve. And so, like, all the families know, man, when we move into phase 3 and Governor Northam says youth sports can go, then we're going to go forward. And all of our families know that, but they'd also know that it's day to day until that time, because he might say we're in phase 3, but you have to remain social distancing. And my families know that we'll stick with what we're doing. And all those emails, I keep reminding them, just so you know, I've never gone through a pandemic, return from a pandemic before. And I keep telling people that. And I think there's a lot of grace that's given by the parents because of that understanding.
Yeah. That's awesome. Chris, I appreciate all that stuff. And if you don't mind, if I can share your email with the DMV group.
Yeah.
Beyond that, but all really good stuff. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, for sure. We're glad to help.
Appreciate it. Matt,
Yeah.
I'm going to pass it on to you to do any PPP loan forgiveness or any other updates. Thanks again, Chris.
Yeah, PPP stuff for that, just be aware that they've constantly changed the rules as far as the forgiveness side. They've made it much more easy for groups of our size to get that loan forgiven without much of a headache. Definitely talk to your bank. I know while the Small Business Administration put out a form to fill out for the forgiveness side of it, I know our bank has told us distinctly that we cannot use that form. We have to use their online portal. So just make sure you talk with your bank about what that process is. I would definitely start looking at it now if you haven't. There's a lot of documentation that you need to provide with that, showing payroll, showing utility expenses. They did adjust the timeline so you have more flexibility of what timeline you're looking at, as opposed to just the immediate 8 weeks that you received it. But your bank should be able to walk you through this. They definitely want you to get it right as well, because it'll be less of a headache for them, because they'll get paid outright from the SBA and not have to wait for you to repay a loan. So definitely get them involved. For those in Maryland, I know yesterday was a bit of a chaotic night. So the governor basically put us from phase 1 to, phase 7, and basically said we can go back to playing on Friday with really no restrictions. The problem is there's some ambiguity in that language, and also it still leaves the counties to decide. So I can tell you firsthand that Montgomery County will not be opening, and my understanding that Prince George's will not necessarily be opening as well. And then Howard County, if you don't know, their school board has closed all fields to outside user groups till January 2021. So there's still a bit of a mess on the Maryland side as far as what reopening looks for us. We have inquiries in through the state about the language they included about events cannot be open to the public, to try and get a better definition of what that means. Our take of it from the task force side was that is related to ticket sales for events and not families on the sideline. But again, we're waiting for the legal guidance from that. As of this morning, and I need to update the website and I'll send the link out. The Maryland Sports Commission has made a online resource for sports organizations, which does include the report that Terry and I worked on that went to the governor. It's about 46 pages of recommendations for competitions, tournaments, from the medical community, from facilities, from park and recreation standpoint. So it's a pretty thorough document. It's got a lot of stuff in there, a lot to digest, but I will make that available to everybody. It is public at this point. And we're just trudging along, trying to sort this out. I'm actually on another call right now with the Park and Planning Commission, trying to figure out what they're doing. They're just a little behind in this hearing schedule. So once I have information from them, I'll be able to pass that on, because their current stance is their fields are closed except for small group training until September 1. But after the governor's announcement, I don't know if they're rethinking that or not. I think that's all I got from my side. I will get Keith Scully's contact information. I was on here. He is a great resource if you are looking for marketing or strategic planning. That's his area of focus. So as we come out of this, and I think all of us are going to have to rethink how we do things, he's going to be a good resource if you want to just run something by him or need assistance with things. He's a great guy. He's been around the block. He's worked with US Lacrosse for a long time as well. So he is from the area, familiar with the area, and knows youth sports really well.
That's awesome. Does anybody else have any questions, comments as we all return to play? Is there going to be another run of PPP? Matt?
I believe there is still funding available for the second round of PPP. I don't think they used all the funding. So you should be able to still apply if you have not done already. I do not know if they will do another full run of another PPP program. I know the House has passed one version of the HEROES Act. The Senate is not on board with that at all. So I think it's a real question mark right now what the next round of stimulus looks like. And my guess is they will actually hold off a little bit to see how reopening works and what that does for the individual industries. I will say from a job report standpoint, hospitality and leisure was the #1 pickup in jobs in May. So those of you that are running events over the summer or going in the fall, that means hotels are coming back online, restaurants are coming back online with more staffing, gyms, things like that are hiring again. So we will be the leading edge of the economic recovery. So it's up to us to get back on the field and do it safely and not screw this up for everybody else.
Yes, indeed. All right, folks, unless anybody has anything else to say, I see Pat out there with his mask on the field, ready to get back at it.
Yeah, we got training here in a little bit, night 4, and it's gone pretty well thus far. But thanks so much for all the guidance and all the sharing that everybody's been doing. It's just been spot on, and it's made it run so much smoother than we would have anticipated.
Hey, Pat, can you tell everybody what you guys are doing with your online waivers and screening with the Google Docs? So, because I think it works great. So.
Right. I mean, behind me, you can probably see all the cars that are lined up, and we've got a kid who played in the club who's doing a sports management major at University of South Carolina. He's checking everybody in per car. He's checking that they've uploaded their COVID-19 waiver and that they've completed their training day health survey that basically states no fever, haven't come into contact with anybody, and it gives them a quick rundown of what the process will be. Kids are walking down the hill one by one, about 20 yards apart from each other, and when they get down to the step, they get told which field to head to based on their coach. We've only got 3 groups going in this first session today. We have a max of 4 groups going. We're just putting a group of 10, 9, and a coach on a half a field for this week. And of course, with all of the news, we'll figure out how that phased approach advances here over the coming weeks.
Pat, what are you, is this like just an age specific thing, or are you limiting it? How are you organizing that?
So we've organized the groups by their by their age groups. Coaches have sent out a note, kids updated on TeamSnap their availability, and then we put them into groups, and then we sent out the schedule. And again, if they didn't respond, then they weren't put into the group. I just did see an email from a kid who was trying to get into the 6 o'clock session, and I'm not sure if her coach will be able to see it in time to get her in, but they were all given a deadline to get in.
Are you guys thinking about expanding the groups for next week now that things are kind of?
I think that's the plan, but I guess we still need to look at what all of the guidelines are at this point, and see what makes sense.
Got it. All right. Well, keep us posted if you guys come up with any other initiatives. You're pointing fingers and calling, pulling strings. So good luck out there, Pat. Appreciate you, man.
No, appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Awesome. Lori, you have a tournament question here. You want to chime in and give any getting called out on the spot here just from the tournament?
Actually, I think that's more of a question for Matt at this point.
Love
the deflection.
Well, thanks, Lori.
Yeah.
It's a fair question. So our plan, and we are preparing to be ready for our July events. So as of today, Lori, you will now be the first event that takes place at the facility since we lost the lacrosse event the week prior to you. So you'll be the first person on our fields, really.
All right. Let's get after it.
But we are prepared. So we haven't put them out yet because we don't really have people on property. But we have signs for every field that talk about what the rules are, as well as basically if you are experiencing any symptoms, don't come on the property. We have signs in the bathroom that remind people to wash their hands. We will have markings on the ground for social distancing at the bathrooms. We will likely, for events, staff the bathrooms with somebody to monitor them to make sure people are abiding by those rules. And we'll work with Laurie and the group once we have a better idea of schedules and teams about how we adjust the schedule to modify entry and exit from the facility so we don't have a mass rush of people at the same time. Right now as Maryland moves into later phases, our food situation may change. Currently, we're looking at food trucks with prepackaged food only, no cooking on site, just to limit the amount of contact that we have. I think we will be ready if we're allowed to be open, is what the short answer is to that. We have a little politics to deal with in this county, but that's for another day. But we will be ready as soon as we're allowed to be ready.
Awesome. Well, right up on 4 o'clock, kind of covered quite a bit here. So I appreciate everybody jumping on. I've got this recorded as well. So if anybody wants to share it with their technical directors, folks who are on the operational side, obviously a lot to take in and implement within a very short amount of time. But I think that's it. Matt, I know you and I have talked about trying to engage everybody back in now that there seems to be a little bit more normalcy returning here soon. So we have some other topics that we want to address, and including there's a lot of work that all of our club need to do around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I know that I've been having great conversations in smaller groups about engaging people who have a lot of experience educating organizations on how to really integrate that into organizational structure, and so that we can really move forward in that category as well. So that's something. Yeah, go ahead.
Another one I think we'll have lined up for next week, but I'm going to bring somebody on from a facility from another part of the country that has already had an event at their facility to talk about what an event looks like post-COVID, and what to expect and how to deal with what they learned from those first couple of events once they opened up.
Awesome. All right, folks, we'll be back in touch. Good luck as everybody transitions back onto the field safely, and hopefully we can all do the better job we all do collectively, the less likely there's a spike back, so we can hopefully just put this all behind us. So good luck, everybody. Stay well. Talk soon.